To Kamala Harris, who is speaking right now in Michigan with Liz Cheney, as you just heard. She's taking questions from reporters. Here she is.
Weeks will make $15,000 a year, which is essentially poverty wages. So there is a big difference between Donald Trump and me on a number of issues, including this, where I absolutely believe we must raise minimum wage and that hardworking Americans, whether they're working in McDonald's or anywhere else, should have at least the ability to be able to take care of their family and take care of themselves in a way that allows them to actually be able to sustain their needs. The other issue that has come up recently has been the issue of what we are seeing again about Donald Trump just being frankly hostile to the whole notion and importance of Social Security. There are many seniors in our country that Social Security is their only form of income. And now an independent agency has reviewed Donald Trump's theory about Social Security and his policies and has indicated that his policy would actually render the Social Security fund empty, essentially, in 6 years. Again, if you look at it from minimum wage to Social Security, Donald Trump clearly does not understand the needs of working people, with Social Security being rendered insolvent in 6 years. What that would mean for the seniors of America is catastrophic. And then lastly, on the issue of contraception, I'm very pleased that our administration today announced a rule that would essentially allow folks to get contraception over the counter. And as we know, my policy is about making sure that Americans have what they need in terms of their reproductive health. And Donald Trump, you just look at his plan his Project 2025 would actually restrict access to contraception, which would just contribute to the public health crisis he's already created. I'll take any questions.
I'm going to start with Erica Green of the New York Times.
Madam President, Vice President, sorry, I'm sorry. Could you please speak to your messaging today, particularly as you go through the suburbs? You're trying to reach swing voters. Among them are women, white women, who voted for Donald Trump in the last two elections. Can you talk about your messaging to them and what you're hoping to break through today?
So today I am spending the day with former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. We are traveling to 3 states to talk with all Americans about what is at stake in this election, but doing it through the lens of a very important point, that what is at stake in this election is so fundamental that it really does cross partisan lines. We are talking about whether you will have a president of the United States who takes seriously their duty and their oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And there is a clear distinction here, which is that I will and he will not, as evidenced by many statements he has made, including his intention to be a dictator on day one, his intention to weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. And then you just look at what the people who know him best and worked with him in the Oval Office in the White House have said about him, which is he is unfit to serve and would be dangerous if he were president again. And he, even by the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has been called a fascist to his core, I am quoting. So what we are talking with folks about today is what I've been talking with folks about since I've been on the campaign trail these last 70-odd days, which is this is a choice for the American people. And it is a choice between whether we're going to chart a new way forward that turns the page on the division, the hate, the chaos of Donald Trump, but also, and maybe even more fundamentally, do we have a president of the United States who stands behind the seal of the president of the United States, taking seriously their oath and their duty to uphold the Constitution of the United States and abide by the rule of law? And so I'm out here talking with folks to remind them of what's at stake. And I'm very pleased and honored that so many people are showing up to these events to have this conversation, because I think they know, regardless of who they voted for in the last election and the party with which they're registered to vote, on some issues we just have to all be Americans and put party aside.
We're going to go to Colleen at the AP.
Hi. Madam Vice President, do you think that Republican voters, and specific women voters, will be more likely to vote for you because of the fall of Roe? And are the Republican votes key to winning the blue wall states?
So I look at what happened in the midterms and in special elections to guide my thinking about this issue. And what we saw is in so-called red states and so-called blue states, when the issue of the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body is on the ballot, the American people vote for freedom. regardless of the party with which they're registered to vote. And I do believe it is such a fundamental issue, which is understanding you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling women what to do with their body. So I do believe it is a compelling issue, especially when we consider the fact that for so many of us, our daughters are going to have fewer rights than their grandmother. And America's strength, one of the attributes of our progress has been the expansion of rights, not the restriction of rights. And that's what we're seeing happen, and it has happened because Donald Trump created this situation when he's hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe versus Wade, and they did as he intended.
We have time for one more. Andrea at Reuters.
Yeah. Hi. So Elon Musk is giving away $1 million a day to voters who sign a petition. Do you have concerns about that in the context of law, you know, the sort of legal framework around elections? And secondly, a Reuters investigation has shown something like 300 cases of political violence already in the run-up to the election. Can you just address what can be done and what the federal government can do to push back against that?
Well, on the first point, I think people are looking into that. On the second point...
When you say people, do you mean the U.S. government?
I mean, I hear that folks are looking into it just based on the stuff you all are reporting. On the second point, there should be no place in America where we are seeing political violence. And sadly, we have seen, if we just look back to January 6th, when that occurred in a way that was most shocking and brought on because, of course, of Donald Trump, who incited a mob, a violent mob, that attacked the United States Capitol, wherein over 140 uniformed law enforcement officers were injured and some were killed. And where Donald Trump has still yet to acknowledge the travesty of that day and the political violence that occurred that day. So I will say and repeat what I think most people understand. In America, in a democracy, we should have no room for, nor should we ever condone any form of political violence. In a democracy, people will debate, people will disagree, but not resort to violence. And everyone should speak out about that, including and especially anybody who's running for president of the United States.
Thank you, Madam Vice
Thank you all.
Vice President Kamala Harris there taking questions at a campaign stop in Michigan. Then she will go on to take the stage in later events today, as you heard, as she has earlier in the day as well, with Liz Cheney, the former Republican Congresswoman. They talk about what they say is a threat to democracy posed by former President Trump. I want to bring in Selena Wang, who's standing by at the White House, who is watching that Q&A along with me. And Selena, first and foremost, we saw Harris there, as she has on stage today with Liz Cheney, lean into this idea and this messaging to disaffected Republican voters to try to bring them into the Democratic fold and try to run up the numbers with that demographic, specifically in some of those key swing states like Michigan, where she has been, like Wisconsin, where she's going. She was also in Pennsylvania today. What do we know about that strategy, and what do we know about the potential effect it could have? Have we seen any polling on it or something like that?
Yeah, look, Jay, they know that it's a very small sliver of voters who are currently undecided in those battleground states. But in a race this close, they're betting that someone like Liz Cheney is going to be able to move things around the margins, which could be the decisive factor here with some of those independent, moderate Republicans who are unsure about Vice President Harris, but they're also deeply uncomfortable with Donald Trump. And so our message along with Liz Cheney is that those folks have a home within the Democratic Party. Another strategy that she's deploying to reach those folks is abortion rights. You just heard her talking about it in her interview with reporters just there. She is most comfortable when she talks about this issue, and she mentioned that in every state where abortion rights has been on the ballot, people have chosen to enshrine those rights. And Liz Cheney also had a direct message to suburban, moderate Republican women on this issue. You'll remember that Liz Cheney herself has said before that she supported the overturning of Roe versus Wade. But today, she's saying to those voters that even if they are anti-abortion rights, they should still vote for Vice President Harris because those abortion bans have gone too far. But really the central theme from Liz Cheney is that she is deeply conservative, and it's because of her conservatism that she's supporting Harris, because she's putting the Constitution over her party.
I want to go back to abortion just very quickly because Harris, as you just mentioned in that Q&A just a few moments ago, said that voting for, quote, a vote for freedom, when it's on the ballot, voters choose that, quote unquote, vote for freedom. But we've also seen some reporting out of states, let's say like Arizona, where abortion is on the ballot there, and voters have told, according to Politico and others, that canvassers that they're going to vote for overturning that ban, but also vote for Donald Trump, that there might be this split ticket voter who votes to overturn an abortion ban, but also votes for Donald Trump. What is the Harris campaign strategy around reproductive rights? And is that a concern for Democrats?
I mean, look, the polling around this has not been all that accurate. If you look at the midterms and some of those special elections, you saw that abortion outperformed than what the polls had shown. But overall, the Harris campaign views all of the polling as pretty much the same since the start, which is that this is an extremely tight race. It's all decided on the margin of error. And they're certainly going to continue leading into that abortion message, but they've really got different strategies for different segments of voters. They believe that abortion is going to drive more of those moderate, independent-leaning women to the polls. They have a different message when they're targeting black voters in Georgia, when she's been targeting these Latino voters in Pennsylvania and some of those Sun Belt states as well. So they're really going all out here because her campaign knows that it's not enough just to excite her base and to turn out her base, but she's got to reach other voters as well and potentially try to bring some of those former Trump supporters onto her side. But it is a difficult task, and they know it's a really small group of people at this point who truly haven't made up their mind.
Selena, just hang tight there at the White House. We do want to bring in Rachel Scott, our senior congressional correspondent, who's on the trail with Donald Trump right now in North Carolina. Rachel, I want to get to very quickly what Donald Trump's plan is today on the trail. But first, you cover abortion rights extensively for us in this battle over reproductive rights. You heard me just talking about it there with Selena. How is the Trump campaign reacting to this strategy from Democrats to try to bring home this point of abortion rights to voters in swing states?
Well, Jay, that point that you just mentioned there to Selena, talking about sort of these split ticket voters, right? The idea that a voter in Arizona could vote to protect access to abortion, but then at the same time also vote for former President Donald Trump. That is something that the Trump campaign is keenly aware of. Even though former President Donald Trump often brags about appointing 3 of the Supreme Court justices who supported overturning Roe versus Wade, they've also tried to really soften their approach on this issue in recent weeks. And there are voters out there, especially in critical battleground states like Arizona, who see that as having abortion on the ballot in this coming election the best of both worlds. It allows them to voice their concerns about an important issue like abortion rights, but then also then vote their conscience at the top of the ticket for someone like former President Donald Trump. It is something that we might see play out in Arizona, and it's important to note that in all of the states where abortion rights has been on the ballot, all 6 states where it has happened, abortion rights has won every single time, including conservative states like Kentucky, Ohio, Kansas. It's also going to be on the ballot in Florida. No, that's not a battleground state, but it's certainly one where Democrats are hoping that plays to their advantage. So it's something that we're going to be watching and following very, very closely. I will tell you that Vice President Kamala Harris still has the edge when it comes to likely female voters in the polls. And this is something that the former president is also keenly aware of. And so in this final stretch here, he's really tried to target his approach and pivot some of his pitches to women voters especially. I will tell you that even at his rallies, he delivers a sort of closing monologue, speaking only to the women in the room. They've really tried to ramp up sort of their policies around IVF, talking about supporting that, so talking about supporting women's issues as well, because they are concerned that if more suburban women support Vice President Kamala Harris in some of those key battlegrounds, including areas like Pennsylvania, that could really do some damage to the former president in the states that he needs to win in order to clinch the White House, Jay.
Selena Wang, Rachel Scott, an impromptu conversation of the 3 of us over abortion rights and how it factors into this campaign, driven by what Kamala Harris just said. Thank you both very much for your time.